Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi, and today I'm here with photographer Rhonda Proctor. Rhonda is a North Carolina-based photographer with a broad visual interests from black and white photography to nature, animals, abstract, and more. She's also a member of the Sharpshooters International Photography group. Welcome to the show. Rhonda is not only a photographer, she's also a fellow sorority sister, so we connected that way, and I'm so excited to be able to host another sorority sister on Creative Piecemeal. We're going to get started with who or what inspired you to become a photographer.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's for me, being a photographer has been a very holistic and natural process. And it started as a child. My dad was a professional photographer, so I pretty much grew up with photography in our household. And while I didn't take it as a career adventure when I was young, the older I've become, the more interested I have been in different aspects of photography. And so it was just a natural transition as I've changed throughout my career and throughout the years that photography just, again, it's always been my passion. So it just felt right at this time.
That's really great. And in your biography on your website, you note that you use a Nikon, but is that like your dream camera, or do you prefer to shoot with different cameras depending on what you're working on?
I think for me, any camera is good as long as it's in your hand and it's readily available. I use Nikon. My dad was a Nikon photographer, so probably that's why I have a Nikon. But I have Sony's, I have Rolleiflexes. I use my iPhone. I use film, digital. I use DSLR. I use mirrorless. Pretty much as long as I can take a picture, I'm good with it.
That's fantastic. You mentioned that your dad is also a photographer. Is that how you got passionate and started about the field?
Well, I used to help him when I was young. And so I think in the film days, that was a lot of fun adventure because I got to work in the darkroom with him and learn to process film. He did primarily weddings. So he worked a lot with the brides with black and white portraits in our home, as well as I would help him change film in the cameras during weddings and clear to post-processing when I was numbering negatives. Once I got married and had kiddos, of course, that's a natural transition that we start taking pictures of our kids. And then my husband got into motorcycle racing. And that's when it really launched me into, I guess, a more serious avenue of taking better quality photos. And from there, I've just naturally transitioned into where I'm at today.
Oh, that's really cool. What is a piece of photography advice that you ignore and one that you always follow?
Let's see. I ignore all the rules that everybody tells you must follow because then you are thinking inside the box instead of being creative. So while yes, you shouldn't take pictures directly in the sun because you're not going to get a good photo, we have to think outside the box and how we want to take it. So maybe I angle things differently, or maybe my creative process in software editing is a little different than what other people do. I think the basics, though, you have to follow, which are the rules on how you set your aperture, how you do your shutter speed, how your ISO is set. And I think the biggest thing is understanding your camera and the equipment that you use. And those are definite rules, because if you don't know what you're using, you have a hard time getting the result that you want.
How do you feel about the fact that phones these days are really catching up so much to the expensive DSLRs?
For me, I don't mind at all. I use my camera phone a lot, and you can get some really good photo results from using your camera. And even the professional organizations like Professional Photographers of America, they actually now have categories that are iPhone or camera phone related people can get awards for. I think some people think it has to be your traditional camera. For me, it's all about if you're at the right place at the right time and you have a piece of equipment that you can take a picture of, that's better than having nothing at all and wishing you would have had that result. I think, technology's changing. iPhone cameras are a big thing now. I think it makes it a little hard with people thinking that just because you have an iPhone camera or you take a picture, it makes you a photographer. It doesn't. There's a definite learning curve. But I think everybody should have a camera and have that opportunity to capture those moments in life that have meaning to you.
That's really good point there, that yes, it does take training to get to be a photographer, but you don't want to miss the special
Yeah.
moments in life.
Yeah. Now, that being said, you don't want to be a wedding photographer with an iPhone camera.
Right.
So,
Yeah. That would be a little bit difficult, I think.
yeah.
So with photography obviously comes a lot of different steps and parts, but what are your least favorite and your favorite parts of the creative process?
Oh, I think, well, the least favorite and my favorite are technology, in that technology makes a world of difference in how we can manipulate our photos and how we want to portray our results. Even if it's with a wedding picture, or in my case, I do a lot of abstract. So I use a lot of technology for that. The least favorite part is staying up on all the technology because, as you know, with every computer software update, there's a learning curve and it is continuously changing. Same way, even for example, when you were asking about the iPhones, each new model, something changes, and so we have to learn it. So I think that's one of my least favorite. I also think within the photography field, and probably with everybody, we can be our own worst critic and we always find flaws with things. So the hardest part for me is when I'm editing something, I find every little flaw that no one else would ever see. And so I always question, is it good enough to print? Is it good enough to enter in a competition? So I've had to learn to be my own best friend and give myself encouraging evaluation. Even when I'm looking at it and going, oh, I see a little blade of grass that I don't like. I should have changed it and I didn't. Um, I think one of my favorite things is that it allows us to be different and to try new things. So, I love right now, instant cameras have come back with the instant film.
Oh
So it's old
yeah.
as new again, and everybody's having a great time with that. And I think that's really fun. You're actually getting something in your hand physically besides just the digital that most people don't print anymore. And so for me, that's a lot of fun, taking old technology that's become new again and embracing it. And I think one of my favorite parts is just I travel. I like to get it within my area, my backyard, go somewhere I've never been, or travel somewhere in the world I've never been and just go out and explore and see and do. There's always something to capture. We just have to be still and look for it.
I love that. And that leads us so nicely into the next question, which is, where do you find your inspiration, or what are some of your favorite places to get inspiration if you feel like your well has run a little dry?
I just go outside. Most people, and some of my work that people love the most is stuff that people have walked right past and not noticed. It caught my eye, a flower. And if you stop and you go outside and you look at a flower, chances are you're going to see a bug on that flower, or you're going to see a leaf with a certain design. Or if you look up at a tree instead of through the trees, it gives you a whole different perspective. So for me, it's just going out and just taking a moment to be still. And especially when I feel a little less than inspired, I'll go try to go do something different or go somewhere different. I love animals. They're unpredictable, but sometimes I'll go out. I went out one day and there was a cow and it came towards me. So I was like, oh, it had the longest eyelashes. So my object that day was to take the eyelashes picture. And it was something everybody looked at and they're like, wow, what made you think of that? And it was just because I was out. And so I would just say for anybody, just go outside, take a moment and look around wherever you are. Just be still and listen. You'll hear things that'll draw your attention. Just don't be afraid to just be still for a moment. See what you see.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, nature and animals are so soothing and really present such interesting opportunities for photography.
Yes.
So, we talked about things that have inspired you, but who are some of the biggest influences in your life? You mentioned your father earlier. Are there any other photographers that you look up to who've influenced your work?
Yeah, so I've been extremely spoiled, I think, in my lifetime with my dad being a photographer. He taught photography. He was very involved with the Professional Photographers of America. So I was his shadow and attended all the conventions and the seminars. So I have had the opportunity to meet so many profound, I would say profoundly gifted photographers, and each one of them had their inspiration drawn from something else. So I think for me, it's not a photographer that's really inspired me, it's all of them. And in today's social media, it just opens the world. And so you can go on Instagram or Facebook or just do a Google search looking for that inspiration, and it opens it up to the world as opposed to a particular person. I will say though, one person that I'm not sure if people have been familiarized with, but there's a lady named Vivian Mayer, and she started taking pictures in 1949. She took over 100,000 film pictures, and they were not discovered until 2007 when an individual bought her rolls of film in an auction. And so he started opening them, and it's just hidden gems of her life. She was a nanny. She was in New York, and then she moved to Chicago, and it's just real world. And she took pictures up until 19 into the 1990s. So to see that work amassed and no one saw it until now, in a way, it's inspiring that somebody took that many pictures and captured that much of those moments. But it inspires me too to make sure that I share it, because she didn't share it with the world until she was long gone. And I think we all should share with each other.
Yeah, and that's so fascinating. It's almost like a time capsule. And I have asked some people on the show actually regarding time capsules what they would put in them. What do you think you would put in yours?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. I would put some photos, definitely. Something, I guess, memorable that would be from, around the house, or my favorite things. I would put my favorite coffee cup because I love coffee. And it says, "Good morning, sunshine." So, got to start off the day in a positive note. I am a musician, so I would probably gather a variety of my favorite pieces of sheet music. Definitely put a little Beethoven in there. Love Clementi. I love some modern stuff. So I would probably put some things from today's date of what's popular. So we could, they could look back. I do calendars with my prints. So I'd probably put this year's calendar so they could see what my interpretation was for the year. And then I would probably grab a camera, water seal it in a bag, make sure it's water sealed, put it in a protective bag, and put it into, because technology changes so quickly now that it would probably be interesting for whoever would open it to see this relic of a camera that I'm currently thinking is high tech.
If you could travel in time and photograph somewhere, what and where would it be?
Oh my goodness. Well, travel and photography is just right up my alley. I just returned from Qatar, from Doha, Qatar, and Tanzania, Africa. And I spent 3 weeks on an adventure photo expedition that my husband and I took. So that was amazing. I love all parts of Europe, and there's a lot that's left to see. So I kind of have a travel bucket list of places I want to go. We've just ticked that. That was my number one bucket list item. So I think our next would be Italy Switzerland, Sweden. And my husband and I do motorcycles. So we'll probably, motorcycle adventures are a lot of fun. So I find those are a great adventure too. Not as easy to take all my camera equipment as it was when we went to Tanzania, but yeah, I just, anywhere I haven't I haven't been before. We don't like to repeat our travels, so it's always somewhere else that has, new geographic things to look at, new demographics. I love people, places, things. And so anywhere that I can go that I'm allowed outside or even inside, I'll go take a picture of.
What generally catches your eye, whether it's when you're on vacation or around the home?
Usually the first thing is movement. So if I were to go outside, for example, I would look and see what moves and catches my eye. And usually it's something colorful, a flower. And then I'll go over to the flower, and usually then you find a bug or something along that line. So I'll start with one thing, and it usually just drives me into a whole other avenue of other things that I find that we wouldn't even notice.
Nice. You mentioned in your bio also that you like to do macro photography, and that's where you get really, really up close, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I love things up close. I love distance, but I think for me, it's finding those unexpected things, especially the most minute. Or you look at something, for example, if you took it's been rainy here, so we've had these big, massive mushrooms pop up. So they're cool on the outside, but I like to take my camera and look underneath. So you see all the ridges and, all the textures of the mushroom that you would not notice from just looking above. So if I can get ground level with something, I will. I try not to be destructive with nature or with insects, so everything has to be alive and attached. So I try never to clip a flower. Makes it a little harder if there's wind to get a picture, but I try to leave everything as is so I don't leave a footprint anywhere.
That's wonderful to hear. You obviously grew up with a lot of wonderful photography experiences. What is something that you wish you had known, though, when you first started?
I think being more patient, and it's hard to be patient. Everything about photography, there's a learning curve to learning your camera, to learning your lenses, to learning the software, to learning how to use everything together, as well as just learning to sit still and let things happen. I think, especially today, we're always in a hurry and we want it instantaneously, and not everything can be instant. And that being said, when I'm taking photos, I kind of get in a groove and in my mode, and I don't want to slow down. I just want to take it and move on. And sometimes the best moments are the ones that you wait for, and then it happens. But you have to be able to learn to predict things, especially with animals, with their movements, or with the wind. How is it blowing? Which way is it blowing? So that if you take a photo of a flower, you know when to expect that your camera is going to move. Same way when I was doing motorsports, I had to learn to pan. When the motorcycles were going 180 miles an hour, they're going fast, and I have to stay still body wise while I'm holding my camera, but I still have to move in order to capture them. So I think patience is the name of the game, and not being too hard on yourself, because they're not all going to be perfect photos.
Do you ever find that you like the quote unquote imperfect photos better?
Absolutely. And what I've discovered, and especially since I've kind of jumped into abstract photography, I'll call it artography, because it's not in its pure sense a photograph, but I take a photograph and I turn it into something, into a piece of art. So in those cases, I may find a shape or a design of how my photo turned out, and it may not be perfect, and that's okay, because those flaws are going to help me as I'm turn it into an abstract thing. I may twist the photo, I may add movement to the photo, I may change its shape. For me, it doesn't have to be a perfect photo because it's going to become something abstract. But if someone looks at it, sometimes they'll see it and they'll go, "Oh, I see the broom." I'll take an everyday object and turn it into something. If you're still enough and you look at it long enough, sometimes you can find what the object is. Sometimes they make it where you can't figure out what it is.
That's really neat. What are some goals that you have for your photography business in the next few years? Or are there any projects that you would love to do, or anything new that you're going to be embarking on that you'd be able to share with us?
Actually have been working on expanding out. I've got to create a new website because I've kind of outgrown what I have, because my business has expanded into selling not just prints, but calendars and other formats of photography and artwork. I'm looking at expanding out into interior wall art, fine art, as well as into some other aspects. And I'm working on, now that I've got my feet wet in the Winston-Salem area and I am meeting the right people and making those connections, I've got some plans that I'm going to hopefully be able to get integrated into my business within the next year or so.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And if you had like a dream budget, is there anything that you would love to incorporate?
Oh my goodness. If only every photographer had an unlimited budget, we could get everything we need. It's an expensive hobby slash business to have. I think the thing I would do is more travel. I find that there's more interest from seeing areas outside of your region and outside of things you know. And just with the people and with the things we see. I mean, flowers are different, animals are different, nature itself is different. And so I think people can enjoy that and interpret things more like a mini vacation than if they're looking at, oh, I can't go there, but here's what Mount Kilimanjaro looks like. And so I think travel's a big thing for me because I get very inspired when I'm with other people in an area that I'm not used to. And I try not to do the touristy things, but try to go off the beaten path. And for me, that's more fun because I want to get myself embraced within the actual culture of everyday life as opposed to just what you would see as a tourist.
This is a completely non-photography question, but what are some of your favorite or most memorable meals that you've had when traveling?
So I have some weird food allergies, so I have to be careful with what I eat. But usually when we go, they're real good about accommodating my allergies. I think Africa was the most tasteful from the standpoint everything was very organic and natural. So there nothing was processed. So we had fish that was actually caught, that day. And then, the chicken. And the chicken wasn't these mega dinosaur sized chicken breasts. They were actually, a legit normal sized chicken that we had chicken with. And I think just understanding the likes and dislikes and like with the flavors that they use or with the herbs and the spices, they're completely different. And I think it's nice to see how they cook. I know when we were in Tanzania, the place we stayed, I took a day off and I just hung out with the gals that were working there at the place that we stayed. And they took me to the market and we went and got all the food that we were eating for the day fresh there at the market. And then they took me back and showed me how they prepared it. And, I'm spoiled. I've got my microwave, I've got my oven, I've got lots of space. They had one little burner that they used and they cooked everything in one pot and it was a delicious meal. And it was, I think for me, it makes the food even that much better because I got to be a part of making that meal.
Wow, that sounds like such a special and really memorable time.
Mm-hmm. It was.
But I must say, I must ask out of curiosity, did
Mhm.
you take a picture of your meal?
I did. I have not posted it yet. I took over 6,000 pictures on my trip. So I will be getting back to it, but it has been a heavy last 2 months with some photo competitions. So I was busy preparing for those. So now I have to go, I get to go back, pick through my pictures again.
It's always nice to relive memories that way.
It is.
Yes.
It's more fun that way.
Yes. And also good luck on the upcoming competitions.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually just got results back. So I'm happy to say that I got a third place in a juried exhibit in Davie County through their photo and dimension. They had a photo in 3 dimension exhibition. I scored through the jury competition there. And then I also was selected. There's a Center for Creative Economy in the area, and they had a competition for art that was abstract. And so that was right up my alley. And I was chosen for the momentum category winner. And so that print was auctioned off at one of their events.
Oh,
So I was
nice.
excited. I got to see it auctioned off, which I don't get to do very often. So
That sounds like a interesting experience to have happen.
it was great.
We're going to sort of switch gears here. You mentioned that you're a musician as well. If we were to sneak a peek at your music collection, what are some things that we would find? And second part is, does music influence your photography?
Okay, so yes, music definitely influences my photography. I have a love for music, and I think music is very motivating and inspirational. I always find if I'm having a bad day or just kind of out of sorts, I'll set up my piano and I'll play some music, and then I find I'm in my happy place and I've worked through whatever it is I need to work through. I love music. I love a variety of music. But primarily with my piano, I will sit down and play some Beethoven or some Clementi. Love it. I love the classical stuff. I also love the fun kind of pop stuff. And I taught music for several decades. And so I have lots of teaching material too. So sometimes it's fun just to grab one of those books that I used to teach it in. They're simple, they're easy, but the songs are really fun and uplifting. So I'll just open one and randomly play a song. I do find through the transition from music into photography, really to me, they use the same side brain waves. And so I can listen to music and get inspired about something. And then I find that both of them have that creativeness and they both are touch. They're both very visual or very auditory for me, as well as very kinesthetic. So it's an all encompassing aspect of, like with music, I'm reading the sheet music, I'm playing, I'm hearing it, and I'm fully immersed in what I'm doing. And I can get lost in the process with photography just the same. Sometimes to my own demise because I lose total track of time.
That's okay though. I've heard of that happening. You know, people get in the zone, so to speak, and
Mhm.
then next thing you know, it's like, oh, it's bedtime. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
What is one of the most surprising things that's happened since the pandemic and beyond, like that has changed about either maybe the way you've photographed or the way your business is going?
Yeah, COVID was real interesting. I think there were a lot of aspects that people, probably everybody, figured out. Our to do list either got done or it didn't because we had no excuse with COVID when we were all locked in our homes. And so I think that's one aspect we find. It's either a shortcoming or I guess an excuse, right? We're going to do it and we do it, or yeah, okay, I was locked in my house and I still didn't do it. I found that I was able to get things done with regard to COVID. So for me, during the lockdown, I had all these photos. I was able to get them logged, get them categorized, get them updated and backed up. And I think for everybody that has photographs, that's something we don't think about doing. We just throw them on a computer and we don't do anything else with them. Well, what if your computer fails? You've lost all of your photos. So that's something for everybody that's listening. If you haven't backed up your photos, please do so. You can do them Amazon. If you have an Amazon Prime, you get free backup. You can buy an external hard drive and throw them on that and then put that somewhere else. Well, if you've got a lifetime of photos, we need to do the same thing. So I spent COVID, a lot of it, doing all of my backups and kind of that dirty work that I don't like doing. And then I kind of started thinking about, hey, what do I want to do? Now, during COVID, I had to have hand surgery. So I was out recovering because as a photographer, I only had one good hand to use. So a lot of my time was spent working on hand therapy. But it gave me time to really think about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to move forward with my photography. And I think that's for everybody. So I spent a lot of time taking some educational classes, enhancing and learning things maybe that I'd wanted to that I didn't have time to do. And so I've kind of used it as goal setting. And so with that goal, it was, oh, I want to expand my business and I want to launch the following things. I want to enter more competitions. I want to get involved with new networks within the area. So for me, it was kind of my growth opportunity. So I didn't let COVID hold me back, except that I didn't go meet people, but this is when I went out and I just travel the country roads and go take pictures out in the open and fresh air. And it got me out of the house. I got some great pictures of it. I wasn't exposed to COVID during that time.
That's great. And I'm glad that you were able to have a safe and successful surgery and you were able to get a lot of those nitty gritty projects all done with. So that must have taken quite a long time to catalog all your stuff and back them up.
Yes, I will not admit how many photos I had, but let's just say I almost filled up 3 terabytes of an external hard drive. So
They should have
just
a category at the photography competitions of how much space can you take up on a on a
yeah,
flash drive, right?
yeah, and it's shocking, especially with digital, because you don't have to pay for developing, only pay for printing. Whereas when you had film, you were very careful about how many pictures you took because each print it cost you, money to get that processed.
hmm you mentioned that you took some educational courses. What are
Mhm.
some areas that you're interested or still interested in learning more about?
Well, I think for me, and probably for the majority of photographers, it's staying on top of the technology with the software. It's continuously improving, which is great. And there's a lot of artificial intelligence now that's going into the software. So, really, it's just staying on top of that. Same with the cameras. Every new camera has new processes, new ways that it does things, new lenses are the same way. So when we connect all that together, when we may have the basics, this new technology comes with new learning curves. So really, I think it's that and kind of going off into new areas. So for me, I do a lot of nature, I do a lot of landscape. Animals, travel photography, people, I don't do a lot of. So I have kind of ventured off into that. So right before COVID hit. And then if during COVID, I did some headshots of people like for LinkedIn and stuff or seniors. High school seniors are great, and you can socially distance and do that if you're outside. So for me, that was a new avenue that I kind of jumped off into. So I think there's always those aspects because most of us aren't, you know, generalist and we're perfect in all areas. We kind of find our area that we love and we jump into that and we go full force. And then the other, we're like, yeah, we'll learn it later. And so COVID gave probably, I know it gave me and it probably gave a whole lot of other people opportunities to try new things.
Is there a specific book that you would recommend for people getting into photography?
I don't know that there are books anymore that people really buy. Most everything is online through educational courses. A lot of people go to YouTube. YouTube is great. I would recommend Kelby. Kelby One is a great source, and they cover everything: cameras, equipment, how tos, business stuff. I like them. There's a lot of like B&H Photo, who's out in New York City. They do conferences online. So during COVID, when you couldn't go to your conventions, they got creative, and now everything is online. So you can do it through Zoom and participate that way, which I absolutely love. So didn't have to buy an airline ticket, get educated and right at home in the comfort of my own home, watching on TV and on my computer. So, it was like picture in a picture. It was great.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I think the resources are out there, but book wise, I think books are almost a thing of the past because all of the technology now is just online.
It's so interesting to think about that because I remember as a kid, there'd be all these like almost like coffee table books of these just gorgeous photos of famous photographers, when you'd go to someone's home or at the library, and it's like, does
Mhm.
that exist anymore?
It does, but I think a lot of people don't see it because we live in a digital world these days and everybody looks at it digitally. I mean, I think of how many hours we scroll through TikTok or
Mm.
through Instagram or through Facebook. I know Facebook's kind of, like the old dinosaur out of all of these. But, there's something to be said with a nice coffee table book when you go somewhere because it tells you which artist somebody likes or values or kind of their style.
Rhonda, it's been a delight to have you on the show. I've got one more question before we wrap up, and that is, in your own words, what does living a creative life mean to you?
I think living a creative life means holding yourself accountable to your dreams and try to follow through with them. We may not be great at whatever it is that we're dreaming about, but if we don't try, we're going to look back and wish we would have. And so I think we've just got to hold that dream first and foremost as something that we want to try to achieve. Creativity is different for everyone, so we should always support and empower those who want to dive into something new, whether they're good at it or not. You know, I always say it's okay if we fail and it's okay if we fall, as long as we fall failing forward. So that, you know, we don't want to ever say we can't do something, we can't live that dream, or we can't do that, because then we never will try. Can't, never could. And I think we've just got to support each other and hold each other accountable as well as ourselves. What is your dream? I mean, how many times do we share what our dream is with anybody, or what our passion is? And I think we should always have that.
Excellent. I love that. Before I forget, some of our guests will occasionally share really meaningful recipes because, of course, Creative Piecemeal is about all types of art. So, Rhonda, what is a recipe that is meaningful to you that you'd like to tell us about?
Oh my goodness. So I have a strawberry cake recipe that I will be happy to share with you all. And my mother in law and my grandmother used to make this cake, and it is the best strawberry cake I have ever had. Of course, I'm allergic to strawberries now, so I can't eat them. But my family, every birthday, they all ask for the strawberry cake. It's got a secret ingredient that everybody will be like, get out. This is not what you put in strawberry cake. But it is good. It is moist. It is delicious. And I will be happy to share that with everybody listening to the podcast so everybody can enjoy it.
Excellent. There's so many wonderful things that you've shared on the show, so I can't wait for this to go live. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for joining the show and sharing your passion of photography.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.